the staff development and infection preventionist role for Bethel Home and Services. And as Jeannie said, we'll be covering federal misconduct, abuse, and neglect, as well as rights, responsibilities, and dementia care today. We'll cover a lot within the hour. So my first topic fast will come in really handy today. I'm going to navigate between this slide and the next slide. We're going to talk about abuse. It is cause for investigation. This isn't something that when we go through all these things, it's not something you think to yourself, I'm going to sleep on it and see what and think about what to do with that situation. It's something that you report now. And we'll talk about who to report to, but it is cause for investigation. Keep in mind an investigation of something that happened on C wing of a certain building means that, and sometimes the state requires that just because something happened on C wing, we may have to, with nursing, we may have to investigate every single person that was working within a certain scope, within a certain range. So dietary, so just because you're investigated doesn't mean that that you are at fault. The fault comes when you don't report and when you don't come forth with information. It's our duty, our responsibility, it's our privilege to protect and advocate for our residents. So the investigation, failure to report, and if an investigation is done and abuse or neglect is found, then it would be cause for immediate dismissal. So this slide and the next slide go together because they talk about definitions and also how to identify. So physical and sexual abuse, you can think common things like striking, hitting, slapping, hurting, sexual comments or touching or showing or having something within view that they can see that's of sexual nature. Using a closed hand, I always tell people that when you're working with a resident, you never need to use a closed hand unless you're holding their hand. That's the only time. And we can argue about it all day long, but you're not going to find another example. Unless there's an emergency and that's it. There's no other time. If you're helping to turn a resident, if you're helping to lift a resident, it needs to be with an open hand. The more surface area, the better. If you're helping to turn a resident using the forearm and an open hand, just keep that in mind whenever you're working with a resident. The more surface area, the better. Restraining, including rolling a resident up to a table, putting the brakes on. Can they release themselves? Is this for our convenience, or are we putting them up to the table so that they can eat and not push themselves away from the table? Some things you might see regarding signs of physical abuse could be a sudden opposition to a caregiver. And Sean made a good point in the last presentation that sometimes when physical abuse occurs, there's intimidation, and so there is this desire to please. And so you may think that this caregiver has just the magic touch with Alice, and that where maybe just I'm not saying that everybody who has good rapport with a resident is abusing that resident, but sometimes we need to be mindful that the intimidation factor is there and that there's that aim to please. So if there's a change in the relationship with the caregiver, then that would be cause for just to keep your eyes and ears open. If the resident reports something happened, if they say, the two girls, that guy and that girl, or the two people that were working with me last night were really rough, it needs to be investigated. You need to listen to your residents. You need to really hear them, and you need to take what they say seriously. What could have happened, if you're getting a resident up between the wall and the bed, and they almost fall, and they hit the wall, and then you get them safely to the chair, to you, phew, that was great. We prevented a resident from falling. To the resident, they were thrown into the wall and grabbed quickly and thrown into the chair. So making sure that we're talking to the residents and that we are that we're involving them in their care, and that we tell them, we're so sorry, it seems like you were falling, are you okay? And having that open communication. But we need to report right away. We'll talk about who to report to in just a moment. But it's also important to make note that when you hear these things, that we treat it like we would any other healthcare piece of information, like we would with HIPAA, that it's on a need-to-know basis, and that when something like abuse or neglect occurs, that we're not talking about it in the lunchroom, we're not talking about it on the floor, we're not talking about it with other staff members, even if they were involved, other than with the supervisor to help to paint the picture of what happened. If there's unknown or explained injuries, so this is when the source of the injury was not observed by any person, can't be explained by the resident, the tenant, or the client, and the injury is suspicious because of the extent of the injury or the location of the injury, such that it's on the inner thigh and not, on a knuckle that I could easily bump somewhere explainable. Or the number of injuries at one point in time, or incidents of injuries over time, injuries in multiple stages of healing. So when you're doing baths, it's important, we're not just looking for open skin areas, we're looking for skin integrity and for signs of possible abuse that could be occurring. So keep that in mind. The emotional, verbal, and psychological, keep in mind your tone of voice. We can be talking, if you say something exciting to your dog and say, do you want to go to the vet and get put to sleep? They're going to jump up on your lap and they're going to be super excited. But if you scream at them and say, do you want a belly rub right now? They're going to cower down. It depends on your tone of voice. It's not necessarily what you're saying. My dog will probably jump up and down. I don't know. But if you understand what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to degrade our residents by comparing them to dogs, but it's an easy example to understand that our tone of voice, when someone can't understand what we're saying, and my dog can't understand, I know he can't understand what I'm saying, at least my dog can't. So we have to think about our tone of voice. It really keeps, it really has a lot to do with the tone of the entire presence that we have with our residents. Yelling. There's a difference between raising our voice so that someone can hear and yelling. You know the difference. You know the difference. Low and slow are easier heard than loud and fast. And you know the difference. I just know that you do. Name calling, profanity, behind the desk to other staff members, to the residents themselves, even if you don't think that they can understand, they can. And I'm not giving you the tone examples so that you can call them names in a happy-go-lucky voice, so don't get me wrong. I'm just wanting you to know that you need to be mindful of what you're saying about the residents when you're not with the resident. And you need to be mindful of your presence. And if you are at a point where you're wanting to call names and you're using profanity, then you need to tag out. This is about abuse prevention, and we'll talk more about that. Mocking what a resident says. We sometimes will say, have residents say something over and over again. I gotta go for a walk. 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 Or I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom. We need to be mindful that eventually that resident means it. They don't mean it, the 317 times that they say it during your shift, but they do eventually mean it. So we need to be mindful that when we're hearing this resident, client, tenant say these things, that we know when the last time that person that we're caring for was toileted, that we're not treating that, otherwise we're neglecting them. We're treating that as just a behavior. But behaviors are communication, and hopefully everybody paid attention in their healthcare academy. It was very informative with dementia and Alzheimer's about those behaviors. Hopefully nobody has heard this, but you've probably heard some version of it somewhere. Don't be naughty. We're not going to start the day like this. Or come on, sweetie, let's just get going for the day. Let's turn the TV on. It's time for breakfast, and scoot them off. It's just not the way that we're going. That's emotional abuse, where we are talking to them, talking down or degrading to them. Isolating the resident, keeping them away from us just for convenience. This does not include interventions when we are removing them from an overstimulating situation. So don't misunderstand me there. Let's see if I missed any. So sometimes with emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse, you might see that residents that were once very interested in things may become more ambivalent to things that they were interested in and they just aren't. Passivity, shame, confusion or disorientation, trembling, clinging, cowering, lack of eye contact, anxiety. These are things that when you think about if somebody were talking down to you, how you would feel. And again, I don't want to make likeness to a child, which is better than a dog, and forgive me again, just an example, so take it for surface value. But think about how a person would act if they were degraded and talked down to and yelled at in that way. It's difficult. When you have physical and emotional, you often have an overlap. So misappropriation is stealing, taking something that's not yours, marking that you gave a medicine but you didn't, marking that you did cares when you didn't, writing down that you ambulated a resident or a client or a tenant when you did not. That's fraudulent. It's misappropriation of funds. If we're getting reimbursed for something, then we are saying that we did it. If you did do it, make sure you take credit for it and chart it. Because in the eyes of the law and the state, if you didn't chart it, it didn't matter. And what you do does matter. So make sure you chart it so that everybody knows it matters. Because what you do is very important. So accepting gifts, charting something that you didn't do would be misappropriation. Some things that you might see for misappropriation would be a decline in a resident's care. Maybe every single day they're supposed to be getting powder under their breasts, or they're supposed to be ambulating. Well, maybe one day, maybe it's charted that they're ambulating, every single day, but then they start to decline in ambulation. Well, why is that? Are they truly ambulating every single day? Or is that, we need to be mindful. We need to be auditing that we're really doing that. So a digression of health. If a resident reports not having a care done, or you can see that I know no gold bond was put on because there's no gold bond in the room. So we need to make sure that we are having an open communication with nursing staff and CNA staff about who's doing what, and making sure that these cares are being done and that the care plans are up to date. Oftentimes I hear, well, that they don't ever get that anymore. Or that person hasn't had, I worked on a floor once and I said, I can't find this person's hearing aids. Well, their family picked them up a long time ago. They don't even know. Okay, well, let's get the care plan to match, because number one, I'm just wasted 20 minutes looking for hearing aids. And number two, state's gonna ding us because our care plan doesn't match, because they're gonna look for those hearing aids. And when I don't have them, they're gonna give us a ding. We don't want a ding. Dings only go well with dongs and with doorbell, with Christmas carolers. So we'll talk about neglect. I'm not avoiding you, I'm ignoring you is really the best way to think about neglect. Doing nothing, intentional carelessness, intentionally not following the care plan. Saying I don't have time is not, it's not good enough. We have to make time. We need to work together. We need to figure out why isn't something getting done? What's wrong with the process? How can it get done? Saying it's not my patient, not answering a call light because you just answered 10 in a row and you're just tired and it's just Alice again. Alice is my grandmother's name, so that's why I'm using it, so I apologize if that's a resident. I don't know one. So not answering a call light. Answering the phone over a call light is neglect. So signs that this is happening, like skin breakdown. So let's say they're supposed to be turned every couple of hours. Well, eventually we're going to figure out that they're not if their skin starts to break down. Dehydration, dirty appearance, again, hearing aids not in. And again, we talked about the communication about who's doing what, so that we don't just both think that somebody's doing it, because Like when you're in a code situation, what's the first thing they teach you? They don't tell you to say, somebody dial 911. They say, you in the yellow shirt, dial 911. Somebody isn't going to do it. But somebody in the yellow shirt that I'm pointing at is going to do it. So we need to make sure, we're not going to talk to each other like that. Come on, you understand what I'm saying. So what to do when you suspect abuse or neglect is you need to report it, and you need to report it now. So we've talked about what is abuse and neglect and some specific examples, but if something doesn't feel right, it's not right. So listen to your gut. If you don't like the way that something feels, if you don't like the way something looks, if you wouldn't want you to be treated that way, or you wouldn't want that to be your grandparent or your loved one, then you need to stop and you need to do something about it. You need to intervene, or you need to, and then you need to report. And you need to report now. Again, this is not an I'm going to sleep on it sort of issue. Failing to report abuse or neglect is a crime. There is no retaliation that comes from reporting ever. Depending on the crime, it has to be reported to the state and or the police within a 2 to 24-hour window. That's not for you to worry about. You just need to report it, and then we dissect and we do the assessments and figure out what and who and where and when needs to know. All reports will result in an investigation. Again, don't talk about it amongst yourselves saying, well, I heard so-and-so was called in. Well, you know what? They probably were working that shift, and that was it. It doesn't mean, so don't feel a punitive effect from being called in if there is an investigation, and don't be gossiping around. This is, again, we're a profession. We are advocates for our residents, and we need to investigate. And we need to keep the investigations professional and private. And we need to respect the privacy as we would any other HIPAA protected piece of information. Failure to report would also result in an investigation and may result in termination as well. So who you report to depends on where you live when you're working, whose living room you're in. And I say that because we are working in someone else's home. So if you're at Bethel Home, there's the director of nursing, the administrator, a charge nurse, and a staff member on call. Or if you're at another facility, it's likely your manager or the manager that's on call if it's on a weekend, or a director. The administrator always needs to be notified, and then a supervisor. But saying I didn't know who to call is not going to get you out of it. That's not an it's an excuse, but it's not a good explanation. You need to notify the administrator, and you need to get on the phone and figure out who to call. And now you know who to call. You need to call the manager on call. You need to keep calling until you get the administrator and the correct manager or director on the line. So we are a team. We work together. We're going to move forward. We're going to build on what we have. We have a lot that is exciting and a lot of changes going forward. So we are a team, and we do spend a lot of time together. I take it very seriously where I spend my time away from my family, because my family is number one in my life. And if I'm going to be away from my family, I'm going to be doing something with people that I believe in. And that's why I'm here with you. So it says a lot about the respect that I have for you, and how much I believe in you, and what I think about what you're doing and what we're doing together. So if you see a coworker that's having a difficult interaction with a resident, you need to help them out. This is about abuse and neglect prevention. Encourage them to take a break. Always be a role model, setting high standards of what quality care looks like with every resident or client or tenant every day, every time, with every interaction. If you feel overwhelmed, you need to ask for help. It's okay to feel irritated. I told my son when he was growing up with his sensory issues, I said, it's okay to be mad. Not okay that you threw the chair across the classroom. It's okay to get upset. It's what you choose to do next. And what you choose to do next needs to be something that makes the environment healthy for everybody. And isn't that true of what we're doing here? So the choice that we make when we're feeling overwhelmed because Alice has had her light on 13 times in 15 minutes, maybe it's time to tag out. Maybe it's my turn, I'll take the light this time, I got it. Maybe I need to say to my CNA, you know what, I'm gonna just walk outside and put my hair up and pretend it's a new day and come inside. Do whatever you need to do to reset. Take care of yourselves and your coworkers so we can take care of other people. So if you do see abuse or neglect happening, you need to stay calm, you need to stay with the resident, and you need to remove the resident from harm. So stay calm, stay with the resident, and remove the resident from harm. So if you see a family member that is harming a resident, sometimes you'll see family members get frustrated. Sometimes that's why residents or clients or tenants are within our care, is because of caregiver exhaustion. But you may see them frustrated and using a closed hand or yelling. You need to intervene. It is our responsibility and our right and our duty to intervene. So suggest that maybe the resident would like to go for a walk, or ask the family member, I can take Alice to go look at the lights, Christmas lights. Would you like a cup of coffee? If you need help, if you don't feel like you can say something, that's okay. But you need to get in that room, stay with the resident, and put the call light on, or pull the call light out of the wall, or put the bathroom light on. My little sister is a nurse and was a nurse where I worked before doing, and I was doing a training, and we were talking about how to get the attention of somebody, and she said I couldn't get somebody's attention, and this resident, I knew she was having a stroke or TIA, so she threw a plunger in the hallway. So nobody could hear her scream, but do you know how many people came running when they saw a plunger flying down the hall? A lot. So you need to get some help in there. But the important thing is to stop the harm, to stay with the resident, and to get some help in there. Reporting it is the next. So you need to stop the harm, stay with the resident, report it to the supervisor. If it's a staff member that's involved, then that staff member would be determined by the supervisor to go home and would be ensured that they left the building. They would assess the resident for physical, psychological trauma. If sexual abuse is suspected, don't bathe, wash linens, etc., leave as is. That supervisor then would call the police. And then reporting, as we described immediately before, getting statements from all staff and residents. I need to go back one, I skipped some information that's important. So when you see abuse and neglect occurring, again, if you, after the event occurs, you don't think to yourself, I've had a long shift and this is a really horrible situation, I just want to go home and hug my dog. And you need to remember everything that happened. You need to write it down before you leave. You need to write down the who was involved, the name, the gender, the descriptions, relationship to the resident, the people that were there, witnesses. Draw pictures if you have to paint a picture of what was going on in that incident. When did it happen, the time of day, the date, where were you, what wing, what room number, what hallway, what area. Describe the expressions of pain or fear through facial expressions, verbalizations. The resident had her hands over her face. She was screaming. She was, I could see blood coming from her left arm by her elbow. It was dark outside. The blinds were open. Just anything you can think of. Just write everything down as soon as you can. It's very important. And again, not to treat it as, you need to treat it as you would any other piece of information like HIPAA protects. So any questions or comments so far, other than are we done, which is no. Okay, so we're going to talk about rights and responsibilities. Remembering that a right is not what someone gives you, it's what no one can take from you. And also, I alluded to this earlier, but keep in mind that our residents, clients, and tenants do not live in our workplace. We work in their home. And so we're their hired help. So we better deserve to be here, and we better do a good job. And I think we do. I'm not saying any of this as if we don't, but just keep that mindset in mind. you know, how I did my work today, would I be hired back? You know, I know I'd be fired from my own home this week. So client terms or resident terms for abuse is dignity. Every resident and client and tenant has the right to be free from humiliation, harassment, threats, abuse, restraint, isolation, and punishment. What does dignity look like? If I'm the person being cared for, don't talk over me with coworkers during meals. That's verbal abuse. Let me have a beard if I want one. Maybe it's a pain. That doesn't matter. If let me choose my schedule as best I can. Maybe I always get up at 8 o'clock. Try and keep my schedule that way if you can. Privacy. Everyone has the right to privacy. Ensuring cares are completed in a private area, doors and drapes closed, allowing for privacy with phone calls, always knocking and keeping their medical records secure. When you enter into their room, even if you're the only person on that floor and you are working a double shift and it is your 15th hour and it is just you and them, it's still knock knock. Katie, it's your nurse again. You're still walking right into their bedroom, their living room, so you need to introduce yourself. Even if the door's open, every single time, even if it doesn't seem like that person can hear you, pull the blinds at night too. They know that people can see in when the lights are on. And remember that just because I can't communicate as a person being cared for, I'm still a person. Self-determination. Every right has the client to make choices regarding his or her own self, their life, their activities, plans of care, and choice of healthcare providers as much as they possibly can, up to the point that they can't, and hopefully till the very end they can. So how do you know my choices? Listen to family members if I can't tell you. Give me appropriate choices so that it's a win-win no matter what I choose. If I have dementia, then give me 2 easy to put on sweaters and 2 pair of pants that no matter what I pick, they're gonna go together and I can get them all on. Make sure that the 2 options that you give me, you know I enjoy both. Behaviors that I may illustrate are just ways that I'm trying to communicate, and are not always just, that's just Alice, it's just Katie again, she's just rambling on. Grievances. Everyone has the right to contact supervisors and voice their concerns regarding their care without discrimination. In certain cases, may be directed to state officials, and clients are given that upon admission. What if I can't speak for myself? Then we are their advocate. Speak for them. It's your job, your responsibility, and I put that twice, I must really mean it. And it is your honor to serve them. My slides are all out of order here. So, client rights are protected at both the state and federal levels with the intent of protecting each resident, client, tenant, their civil, religious, and human rights while they reside in a nursing home setting or a skilled setting or assisted setting or in a home setting, however we're assisting them. We have to review them yearly, not just because it's mandatory, but because we care enough to do so. Without these rights, there would be abuse, there would be more neglect, there would be poor care. And these rights protect our clients, our tenants, and our residents. So we're going to do Jeannie she just went 30 years forward, and she doesn't have her hearing aids in.
What's my call light?
And this is her call light. So
Nurse!
you need to put, because you don't have your hearing aids in.
Nurse! I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Nurse! Nurse!
We're going to make this realistic. So she's
Nurse! I have to go to the bathroom. I need to go to the bathroom. Are you a nurse? Can you help me, please?
You don't need to go to the bathroom.
I really have to go to the bathroom.
No, you don't.
I have to go to the bathroom.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
I need
We
to
gotta
go.
turn the call light off.
I need need to go to the bathroom. Where's my colleague? Nurse, help!
No.
Help! I want to watch TV. Let
There's
me
nothing
watch
on TV.
please.
There's nothing on TV.
I'm sorry, my hearing aids aren't working. I can't hear you.
All right, well, I'll get your hearing aids then.
Oh gosh, oh thank you. Now I can hear better.
Okay,
I'm
that's
hungry.
better.
I'm hungry.
You just ate.
I'm hungry.
You hungry? Do you want some pudding?
I don't like pudding.
Do you want applesauce?
No, I'm hungry.
Do you want chocolate pudding or vanilla pudding?
Tapioca, please. I don't like anything but tapioca.
Okay.
Nurse!
Nurse,
Where's
you want
my
some
call
tapioca?
light?
Okay.
Hmm?
I'm gonna leave your
My
collar
call
right
light.
here.
I gotta get up. I gotta
Sit
get up.
right
I
down.
gotta get
That's
up. I
enough. We're
gotta
not
get
doing
up.
this.
I
You
gotta
sit
get
down.
up. I
That's
gotta-
naughty.
I-
Stop it.
I gotta
You don't
get
have to go potty.
I'm hungry. I ate all day. Have anybody here to help me? I
What's your
need
call?
help. Nurse! Nurse! Somebody help me. Nurse! Nurse! I don't know how to get this
Oh,
off.
Mrs. Kitty.
Nurse! 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 Somebody help me.
Greta, dial 101.
Nurse! I gotta go potty.
Okay, I'm back and I'm turning off the call light. Okay, I have your tapioca pudding. I found one.
I don't know if I want it now.
Okay. You don't have to go to the bathroom.
I
You just went to the bathroom.
have to.
You don't have to go to the bathroom. Okay.
Yes, I am hungry.
I think I'm gonna take a break.
Well, why don't you hang out here? I just have a feeder.
Okay, sure, we can catch up. Yeah, talk for a while. How's things coming? Christmas celebration coming
Yeah.
along? Got your presents all aboard?
Yeah,
Wrapping.
wrapping almost done. Yeah.
Yes, weather. I have a lot to buy.
Open up,
Oh,
open up.
got some cold weather coming, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We really do. There's still a little bit more.
I'm full.
You need to eat. You need to finish it.
How's your puppy doing?
He's good. We were gonna have to put him down. He was pretty excited about it, but then we didn't have to.
Well,
Because
that's
I
good.
changed the my voice. We have to go back, so.
Nurse, can I have something to drink, please? I'm really thirsty.
Well, we're gonna have dinner in about a half an hour. Drink then, okay?
I'm really thirsty. Nurse, where's my call light?
We're trying to have a conversation. Just 1 second.
Just a second,
have to
okay?
catch up.
Just
We
wait.
can see each other all
Here,
shift.
you can play with this.
You'll be okay.
Look at the
That'll
pretty
be
lights.
okay.
Okay.
Give me a headache.
So where are you going?
Actually, I'm going to be right here in town. Yeah, do you have a big family get together?
Not a big family, no. Just,
That's
to be with kids.
That's a good
Yeah.
You always go for Chinese.
I know, I know. Okay, thanks.
That is not
You did a good job. Sorry about that.
So, let's discuss what just happened there. Name some things she did wrong.
You pushed me back in your
She
chair.
pushed me in my chair.
And it wasn't even locked.
And she locked your brakes.
She locked my brakes and I was
You were ready to
trying.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna tip over.
Yep,
Right.
yep. I was trying to stand
You have
up.
taken your call light.
She took my call light away from me, didn't she? What else?
Eating too quickly.
Yes.
Forced
I was
Tough
forced
time.
fed.
I was force feeding
And
her.
I was telling her I was full and I was thirsty. Did I get anything to drink?
She said she had to go to the bathroom, and I told her she didn't. But
I
did
know.
you see me ask when she had gone last? You know, so we have no idea when. Maybe she did have to go. So
I really did.
We changed.
What's one thing you're missing that happened?
Phone call.
The phone call, very good. We missed that. There's one more thing.
Oh.
Yes. Carrie took her break and those
those two were talking instead of paying attention to
Just
me.
We were just
ignoring you.
excluding her.
Shame
So,
on
and
you.
the conversation that we were having would have been really easy to include young Jeannie. And so it would have been easy to say, Jeannie, you have Christmas lights on. I can see you like Christmas. You know,
But you took her hearing aids out, so she could.
no, I put them in. Those were, that was to resemble her not being able to hear. So when
yeah.
I took them out, that was to resemble me giving her hearing back.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, sorry. So, yeah. So, a lot of things, and Sean brought up some really good points that I'm gonna make sure
Sean's playing, or some,
um,
she couldn't make it.
but making sure, you know, she honed in on making sure that when we see somebody, when we're caring for these people, that they have already gone through so much loss of power and control. And that something she said to me once, actually, and she mentioned it briefly in the first education session, was that the keys that somebody holds really symbolize so much power and control. It holds just think about what in your facility keys mean. It means medication, it may mean the water, it may mean the activities, it may mean the bathroom. It could
Eating,
mean anything.
everything.
So when you think about the objects that they associate power and control with, that's taken away from them so much that we need to build them up, and we need to give back to them as much as possible. If they get a bath, that's controlled by us. If they get extra syrup, it's controlled by us. So think about all those things that we control, that we don't really, I don't think all of us all the time think about those little things. Behaviors are a lot of times also a response to us. Jeannie may have responded differently if I would have said, I'm gonna go check and see when you went to the bathroom, and then maybe I would have said to her, let's have your tapioca pudding. She did that to me last time, I should have known. We'll get and then we're gonna go to the bathroom. Or maybe I'll just take her to the bathroom. You know, if I don't know when the last time she went was, you know, I'll just take her to the bathroom, and then we'll start from zero. So, but just keep in mind that the choices that residents have and don't have anymore, that it's so important that the ones that they do, that we preserve, and that we really are advocates for these people that we are so lucky to be able to care for. So, did I miss anything, Jeannie?
This part, no, here.
Well, that's all I have from her, so
Your blue sheet.
on that part, yeah, okay. So now we'll talk about the ombudsman, who that is. It's the long-term care ombudsman responds to complaints and problems of resident, client, or tenant, or recipients of long-term care, such as those that Bethel Home Inservice provide. What they do, they work with agencies, the residents' families, to resolve the issues that you can see there: quality of care, their rights, personal needs, physical abuse and neglect, dietary needs, restraints, discharge issues, and they can contact them, either family or the resident themselves. And they are a volunteer, and you'll see likely posters of them around the facility. So their rights to be treated with consideration, respect, and full recognition of personal dignity. So giving as many choices as I want. Wipe my face, not like I wiped down Jeannie's face. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I didn't explain a thing that I did for Jeannie as her caregiver. I did not tell her, I didn't even ask her to sit down. Maybe she would have just sat down. I just pushed her into her chair. I didn't tell her.
Can you tell me, did you do one thing right?
I tried to do another one.
I don't know, did anyone here name one thing right she did?
I wore my name tag.
I don't think she announced herself though.
No, I didn't.
No.
When she kept asking, "Are you a nurse? Are you a nurse?" I didn't tell her who I was. So that's another thing, you know, not telling our residents, our clients what we're doing, what we're here for. And they can, so styling my hair the way I want. Don't call me a feeder. And I am not cute. And I am not your sweetie. Now, yes, everybody can say when they look at a picture of my, I rest her soul, my Grandma Alice in a Santa hat, that looks cute. That's fine. But you know what I mean. It's not respectful. It's just not. And I know, okay, we're going to say, oh, it just slips out of my mouth. Or I've always called them that. I don't care. It's not dignity. It's just not. So they have the right to receive care, treatment, and services that are adequate and compliant with federal statutes and rules, and we have to have the capability of doing that. At the time of admission and during the stay, they get a written statement of the services that are provided. And the related charges, those that are covered and not covered under Medicare or Medicaid. And we must have on file the record, the orders of the attending physician with a proposed schedule of medical treatment. My diagnosis must be in my chart as the tenant or resident or client, along with a care plan for me. Me and my leg representative must be involved in the care planning process, like care conferences. So I don't know what I meant.
Legal representative.
It could have been legal.
It is legal representative.
That's probably what I meant. I don't know why I wouldn't have written bill. Anyway, I have the right to refuse treatments. Oftentimes when a POA will give us like consent for an immunization, or a guardian, but then the resident still refuses, that consent does not give us the right to tie them down and give them that immunization. So we have to understand the difference, that they still have the right to refuse us. We don't have the right to force them. Respect and privacy, we talked about all of that. To be free from mental and physical abuse, free from chemical and physical restraints. Unless I can undo the seatbelt myself, it's a restraint. Don't use medication because you're annoyed with my talking too quickly to keep me quiet. Let me participate and organize in resident, client, tenant groups if I'm able to. Let me be involved. This is my home, my community. And they have the right to voice grievances without discrimination or reprisal. So if you hear that Grandma Alice turned you in because you shoved her against the wall last night, then you need to not say, well, I'm not taking care of her anymore. That may be what ends up happening, depending on the investigation. But you need to, you got to get over yourself. You're going to have to suck it up, and you're going to need to give care as guided by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And to give that care means that you are not going to hold against her something that she said out of fear, that she has the right and she needs to feel safe to do that. So if you receive a grievance, you need to report it again right away. We can't open their mail for them unless we're opening it for them with them. Access to the telephone and private phone calls, self-determination and participation, choosing activities and schedules and health care that are in line with their interests, and interacting in the community and with things that are available in the facility, and to be free from misappropriation of funds or possessions. And someone brought up in the last meeting that upon admission, when we have the list of belongings sheet, that is to be, what was decided was that the admitting nurse would delegate that to the CNA. It needs to be done on the same day of admission. And then just remember that you should tell the resident and or their family members that if they bring in additional things that we need to update that form. Otherwise, we can't help you that your life-size Santa Claus is no longer here. If it's not on the sheet, it didn't happen. It's just like documentation of anything else, so keep that sheet updated. So they have the responsibility to uphold their rights to the best of our ability, and then we have the responsibility and duty to advocate for them and be their voice when they can't speak up, uphold their rights on their behalf. So the next portion, there we go. Everybody take two of these.
Take two. Take two.
Brenda brought some up here as well.
Okay. So Jeannie, I'm gonna let you explain what this is and I'll read through the two.
See you later.
Gotta have two of these.
Sheet?
One of them is for you to keep and take, and one is for you to sign. What this is we have put together, when a new employee comes in for orientation, we do a work standard expectation, we do a standards of conduct, and then we do the face of Bethel. This is all three of those put together. So we're gonna go through and remind you why are we here, and hopefully raise the bar of what our expectation is to be an employee of Bethel Home and to meet the level of care and standards that we want to always maintain. So this is something that the new employees go through, but we're going to put it in place as a regular reminder.
So I see you skimming. We're gonna start down at attitude, just reminding you that my responsibility is to serving, I'll say residents, every time it says resident, I intend it, so that I,
Just say mine.
so that I don't get too out of breath. So my responsibility is to serve our residents by providing quality service with care and courtesy. I know that my residents and my family, their family members, and our staff, volunteers, and the public services we have daily contact with, and my peers. Personal appearance, presenting yourself in a professional manner, always welcoming and greeting residents, visitors, and employees with eye contact and a smile like you would if you were at home at a family function, because that is where we are. Following the department's dress code, wearing your name tag at all times, and keeping it secure when you're not working. If you're going to go out for a drink after work, that's fine. If it's not going to be your most fabulous 5 minutes, then maybe just take your Bethel name tag off and your Bethel jacket off, and just be mindful of that. This code includes face-to-face, electronic, and written, including social media. So you want to remember that you are the face of Bethel everywhere that you go and everywhere that people see. So if you are communicating with others, you want to make sure that you're doing that in a positive manner, verbally, written, and through electronic communication. And being responsive in all workplace interactions, actively listening to customers, smiling, being aware of body language and nonverbal communication, and expressing disagreements tactfully and respectfully with an open mind, ready to learn and grow. I will respect the ideas, values, and traditions of others, and will remain calm. Will maintain a calm composure under stress or pressure. The safety culture, you're responsible to report any issue to the proper person, doing so with a non-punitive reporting policy. If there's ever an occasion that you've been made to feel uncomfortable for reporting, bringing that to the attention of your supervisor or administrator. You have the right to work in an area free from disrespectful behavior. It can be directed at anyone or from anyone. It includes ignoring, condescending, sarcastic, rude, or other ill-mannered language or conduct, a disrespectful tone of voice, body language, physical contact, mimicry, putting your hands on someone, whether verbal, visual, written, or through electronic communication. This includes the act of bullying. Bullying is different than two people that just don't get along. Bullying is one way. It can undermine confidence and self-esteem, and sometimes it can be a team effort against one person. And so that's, there's a zero tolerance policy for that. You'll acknowledge your residents' questions and concerns immediately, making their dignity the first priority. Commitment to coworkers. Remember that I will welcome all newcomers to make their adjustment as a team player to the facility as pleasant as possible, remembering that I was once in their shoes. I will celebrate their talents and support the talents less refined. I will demonstrate a strong work ethic by showing that I care about myself and my job, my coworkers, by being on time and lending a helping hand whenever possible. Just treating everybody with courtesy, honesty, respect, and cooperation in the same manner as I would expect to be treated, responding to pages, calls, and phone calls in a timely and professional manner. I saw on Facebook, it wasn't on my feed, it was somebody which had shown it to me, and it was very disheartening, and it was something that I thought, gosh, if I read that, it was a post about somebody had posted about a coworker and about their detest for them because they had called in, and it was just, you know, if you're out there searching for a place to put your loved one, you're not going to be thinking Bethel home when you've read something like that. When you think that coworkers are getting along that way. You're also, if you're a nurse or a CNA or a dietary or maintenance, you're also not going to be jumping on Indeed, hopping on there to work for somebody who has an employee that's talking like that to about another staff member.
But on the same token, if you work with a coworker who calls in every Saturday,
It
how
needs
do
to
you
be
deal with
addressed,
person?
not on
Yes.
Facebook.
Yes, not on Facebook, I agree, but something does need to be addressed for that.
You're correct. But that's a completely separate issue
Yes.
than degrading the face of Bethel on
Right,
Facebook.
right, I agree, I'm not on Facebook.
Yeah.
I won't ever be on there, so.
Privacy, keeping the protection of personal and information of clients and residents private, ensuring that the communication where you're having it is you're mindful of who can hear and what you're saying, and hallway etiquette, making sure that you are saying hello to visitors, asking them how you can help, making eye contact, smiling, saying hello. I will never be too busy to help someone or ask whether